In case you haven't heard, the indictment was handed down in the Ferguson shooting. Let's get the latest from Brian Bouffard, who's a legal expert for 1320 WILS and Fox News Radio. He's a criminal trial attorney and has spent almost 2 decades of criminal trial experience. And he's been studying this case quite closely. Brian, how are you?
Hey, Tony, good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, tell us what happened.
Well, the grand jury, whose job it was to determine whether or not there was sufficient evidence to show probable cause that a crime was committed and that the officer committed it, said no. And what that really means is that when you look at the very low standard of proof that they were operating with, this decision really is saying not only is this officer not guilty of a crime, he's innocent of a crime. No crime took place here. That is essentially the takeaway point of what they have said.
So why do you think so many folks have a problem with this?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, the various agendas that various groups have in our country have been, you know, pretty long-standing, and I think that not just in this instance, but in all kinds of instances, people don't want to hear what they don't want to hear, and so they don't credit evidence that might point some way that their own you know, predilections and biases you know, don't match up with. So to me it's a human nature problem more than it is an evidence problem.
Brian, as you've studied this, and I know there's still a lot of information to go over, do you think it was a good and fair decision?
I can't say that because I don't have access to the evidence, and I try to be, and I wish everybody else would try to be very you know, circumspect about having opinions about things that they don't know about. And so, you know, I wasn't in that room. I do agree, because I know how the system works, I do agree that those are basically the only people to really review everything. Just like oftentimes when you get to trial, you know, it's the jury that is really the first people that have the opportunity to apply the proper legal standard as to whether or not the defendant is guilty or not guilty. So I can't personally say that, but I do think that it's good that they chose to just really give the grand jury everything and then just kind of step back and say, do what you feel is right under the law.
How does that process?
They did it right.
How does a grand jury process work? Say it's decided that a grand jury is going to look into a case. How does that work?
Well, what triggers it is the institution of potential felony charges against someone. If it's a misdemeanor, you don't need a grand jury. They just file it, and then you're in court. But for a felony to go to trial, a grand jury needs to look at it and determine whether or not the evidence is sufficiently there to even go to trial in the first place. And so that's what the purpose of that is, and it's a check on the system so that you don't have overzealous police and prosecutors railroading people into felonies. So that's the purpose of the grand jury. The actual facts of how grand juries operate, you know, typically, you know, a prosecutor will walk in with a stack of 25 cases, and in an hour and a half or 2 hours, you know, he's either got indictments or no indictments in all of them. It doesn't take that long. So the fact that this one took so long, I think, is solely due to the fact that it was, you know, extremely volatile and extremely hyped by the media, and they wanted to make sure that you know, nobody can look back now and second guess what the grand jury did, although we all know that that's exactly what everybody's going to start doing this morning.
Is there a way to know if they had all the evidence that they needed and all the time that they needed to come up with their decision?
Well, as far as the evidence, I mean, who knows? I don't know what was available and don't know what percentage of what's available they saw. I'm hoping it's 100%. As far as time is concerned, they literally can take as long as they want to. There's no artificial time limit on when a grand jury needs to act. And so I assume that's the reason why this took so long, is because they took all the time they feel like they needed.
And Brian, it makes you wonder, those folks who were trying to come up with that decision, if they feared for their safety, for their family's safety.
Possibly, although you know, the results are one that you would think might put them in more danger, although I certainly hope that doesn't take place, and I certainly hope that their names and identities are kept secret as the law requires. But to retaliate against a grand juror is absolutely not the right move on anyone's part.
We've been talking with Brian Bouffard, who's a legal expert for 1320 W Alice and Fox News Radio. Brian, thanks so much for your time. Happy Thanksgiving.
Anytime, and you too. Take care.